Feldway, Rimuru's return was completely unexpected. Seeing Rimuru unharmed gave him a bad premonition. He felt that things would take a disastrous turn, but Diablo interfered, preventing him from taking any action. Before he knew it, Rimuru had tossed something to Diablo. Sensing its danger, Feldway attempted to interfere. However, it was impossible. Because Rimuru only made it look like he threw it, when in reality, he had teleported it. A teleportation skill. Because he himself could use such an ability, Feldway fully understood how troublesome it was. A power that ignored both time and space, allowing unrestricted movement at will. Utilizing it offered immense advantages in every possible way. Not only could it facilitate the large-scale movement of an army, but it was also invaluable in combat. Feldway was well aware of its significance. And yet, during his battle with Diablo, he had barely used it. There was only one reason for that. Feldway lacked the accumulated experience necessary. Despite being a terrifying genius capable of stealing even the skills and levels of others, he was also extremely cautious. He never used unfamiliar techniques in real combat. As a ruler, he only employed absolute winning strategies. Even when facing an unknown opponent, he avoided reckless tactics and relied solely on proven, reliable methods. That was Feldway's approach to battle, the key to his continued victories. However, that also meant he lacked adaptability. Feldway never researched techniques on his own. That was the duty of his subordinates. No matter how useful a skill might be, he would not incorporate it into combat unless its applications had been fully established. Because of that, Rimuru's use of teleportation made him uneasy. If Rimuru were left unchecked, he might grow into an uncontrollable threat. That fear crossed Feldway's mind. Thus, Feldway became anxious. Diablo is already on the verge of death. Demon Lord Rimuru took a direct hit from Mililm's Dragon Nova. He may be acting calm, but inside, he must be in tatters. If so, then now. Taking advantage of Mililm's release from control, he resolved to finish off Diablo with full force. Then, before Rimuru could become an even greater threat, he would eliminate him as well. But Feldway's calculations were far too naive. Diablo, who should have been on the brink of destruction, was completely restored by a recovery potion given to him by Rimuru. Feldway launched his assault, only to be greeted by Diablo, who wore a fearless grin. The moment their sword and claws clashed, Feldway realized his miscalculation. His power has increased. Even an attack infused with greater strength than before was effortlessly blocked by Diablo. Despite the difference in their weaponry, he clashed head-on without issue. Diablo's fighting style had changed. Previously, he had skillfully redirected incoming force. But now, he abandoned such delicate techniques and instead opted for direct power battles. Against an overwhelmingly stronger opponent, that was a fatal mistake, no, a suicidal act. He should have been reduced to dust in an instant. Yet, that was not the outcome. Instead, Diablo handled the situation with ease. Kufufufu, why do you look so surprised? That power? As you surmise, I am indeed utilizing the energy of void. Is there a problem? What? He was about to scoff at the absurdity of it, but then he remembered they were in the middle of a deadly battle. No matter what means one employed, victory was justice. Besides, Diablo showed no signs of strain whatsoever. Unlike before, his body seemed to have fully embraced the nothingness. Impossible, Feldway shuddered. After all, void was a force of destruction capable of annihilating the world. Even Tensura had struggled with it. It was not something that could be controlled so easily. Summoning it to the surface alone was a challenge. While magic could manifest it, there were limits. Even if one did manage to bring void into existence, the negative energy would inevitably be neutralized, maintaining harmony as if nothing had happened. A true rampage of void, one that could threaten the world itself, could not occur unless a gate to the depths of hell was opened. In other words, Tensura and Diablo had opened such a gate. For Feldway, who sought the world's destruction, the best-case scenario would have been for them to lose control. If that happened, he wouldn't even need to destroy the divine tree to achieve his goal. And yet, Diablo was circulating void within his own body. This was beyond mere recklessness, it should have been outright suicidal. Yet he had it under perfect control, an unbelievable feat. If it were Feldway's own body, which had been granted to him by Veldanova, perhaps it would make sense. But Diablo's body. It was nothing more than an amalgamation of unknown components, a patchwork of uncertain origins. There was no way it should have been able to withstand such an unfathomable power. And yet, reality was merciless. Diablo had mastered the fearsome power of void with absolute perfection. The reason lay in the omnipotent cells bestowed upon him by Rimuru. These cells contained the ability of infinite regeneration, and their regeneration speed surpassed even the rate of decay caused by void. Kufufufu, as expected of Rimuru-sama. To think he would grant me such an extraordinary body, perfectly suited to command void. Of course, this was an enormous misunderstanding on Diablo's part. Rimuru had merely intended to heal Diablo's wounds. If it were Seal, perhaps she might have anticipated this, but Rimuru had never intended for Diablo to pull off such an outrageous feat. However, Diablo had his reasons for this misconception. After all, there was already a successful precedent, Zijin. Knowing that, there was no way Diablo would hold back. With unwavering faith in Rimuru, he poured every ounce of his power into circulating void through his body. As a result, he determined the limits of what his body could withstand, and successfully made that power his own. At this point, conventional strategies for battles between transcendents no longer applied. Tisk. Diablo. To think he has not been consumed by that abhorrent void. No, wait. Feldway finally realized the true danger Diablo posed. Normally, even regeneration required energy consumption. This was true even for Velgrin's parallel existence. No matter how invincible or undefeated one seemed, there was always a cost. Even the dragonkind, who possess an inexhaustible supply of energy, cannot completely avoid consumption during battle. That is precisely why high-ranking beings, like Velgrind, master the art of conserving energy while recovering as they fight. In the end, victory goes to whoever exhausts their opponent's energy first. Thus, battles between transcendents tend to result in stalemates, but this notion had now crumbled. Diablo had summoned Void and utilized it as his energy source. The key factor enabling this was the omnipotent cells, with their infinite regeneration, and even the energy required to perform this regeneration was being supplied from Void. What this meant, essentially. Diablo doesn't experience exhaustion. That was the conclusion Feldway arrived at. If that were true, then comparing their total energy reserves was meaningless. What mattered was output alone. To achieve victory, one had to unleash overwhelming, high-powered attacks in rapid succession to erase their opponent from existence. And by that logic, Diablo's skill level was by no means inferior to Feldway's. In fact, even within this battle, he was constantly learning and evolving. Naturally, both the power and precision of his techniques were impeccable, and he wielded the volatile void as effortlessly as if it were an extension of his own body. Feldway's arc slashed across Diablo's shoulder, but in the next instant, the wound completely healed. The destructive force of a Genesis-class attack had been nullified in a mere moment. Tisk. This bastard. Even while reserving energy for recovery, he can wield this much power. Diablo had been reckless earlier, but that was a thing of the past. Now, he believed that Rimuru had granted him a new body, and through this, he had attained a perfect energy balance. It was a feat made possible by Diablo's exceptional combat instincts. Feldway reached a truth he did not want to accept. In terms of existence value, he vastly surpassed Diablo. However, in terms of combat ability, Diablo was superior. And that gap was not closing. If things continued this way, defeat was inevitable. Vega. What the hell are you doing? Struggling against something as insignificant as Ramrus's labyrinth and forcing me to step in. Feldway, having lost his composure, let his frustration slip out. Hearing this, Diablo chuckled. Kufifufu. Vega, you say. Oh, I dealt with him long ago. He might still be alive, but I'd wager he's in a state where death would be preferable. What? Vega was a man more obsessed with strength than anyone, willing to do anything to survive. Feldway had always found that trait to be reliable. The idea that such a man had been defeated was difficult to believe. However, the fact that Diablo stood before him served as undeniable proof. Feldway had no choice but to accept it. Among the three supreme commanders, Zelario had betrayed him, and Fen had fallen. That leaves Jahal. Oh, that guy. I already took care of him, another voice interrupted. You bastard. The thought of summoning Jahal to find a way out of this predicament was quickly dismissed when Yuki nonchalantly appeared. Irritated, Feldway attempted to eliminate Yuki on the spot, but his attacks were effortlessly dodged. Useless. Well, I can't defeat you, but escaping is easy. Teleportation, huh? Correct. I learned it from Mai, thanks to some circumstances. With a smirk, Yuki toyed with Feldway, taunting him mercilessly as if to settle an old score. Kufifufu. That skill is certainly troublesome, but now that I've seen it, I should be able to come up with a countermeasure. Diablo chuckled, but Yuki was unimpressed. Tisk, seriously, Rimuru-san has some real monsters under him. I'm not here to get in your way, so I'll leave the rest to you. With that, Yuki withdrew from the scene. He had never believed he could actually defeat Feldway. All he wanted was a little payback. Having landed a blow, however small, against the mastermind who once sought to control him, Yuki felt a sense of satisfaction. Now, with Diablo taking over, there was no problem on his end. Besides, Diablo was simply on another level. Honestly, I don't think I could beat this guy. If even his subordinates are this strong, there's no way I could ever defeat Rimuru-san. Yuki had no choice but to admit it. Inside his mind. No. You must not lay a hand on him. It would mean your destruction. Maria's voice screamed in warning. Yeah, I already know that. Yuki sighed in exasperation. And then, Diablo's relentless assault began. Feldway's arc was deflected by Diablo's scissors. Despite the overwhelming gap in power, Diablo seemed unfazed. That was the terrifying part. So this is his true strength. Zelario, watching from the sidelines, commented as if it were someone else's problem. Even Zelario, who boasted an existence value exceeding 20 million, felt that he stood no chance against the current Diablo. The sheer disparity was so vast that he couldn't even feel frustration, only resignation. Leon also seemed to share the same sentiment, nodding solemnly. Until now, Feldway had been overwhelming us, but this time, he was the one being pushed back. It was impossible not to be stunned by the situation. And finally, the moment of resolution arrived. End of world Requiem. With a single strike that poured Diablo's entire being into it, Feldway was brought down to the ground. Without even needing my intervention, Diablo had won. It was an incredible feat, though hard to believe. Well done. That was amazing. I never thought you'd actually win, I said, feeling as though a burden had been lifted, and I praised Diablo. Truthfully, Feldway was strong, and I wasn't entirely confident I could have beaten him either. If it had come to that, I would have had to involve Mililm to ensure victory. Honestly, I hadn't expected Diablo to be this strong. Well, although his current state looks even worse than the battered state he was in earlier, I am deeply honored by your praise. Diablo responded with a look of joy, though it was a wonder he was even standing. This wasn't about his physical state, but his mental one. His energy was completely drained, and there was no vitality in his face. He looked like a dead man, or, to put it more mildly, like someone on the verge of death. Are you okay? Kufufufu. Of course. I am deeply ashamed to have shown such an unsightly appearance before you, Rimuru-sama. Though he apologized, Diablo had done nothing wrong. In fact, it was a monumental achievement. I was about to tell him to take it easy and go rest, leaving the rest to me. But at that moment, Feldway, who I thought had been completely annihilated, began to regenerate. Tisk, what a persistent guy. I thought I had completely finished him off, but it seems he's still not gone. Diablo spat out in frustration, his eyes sharpening. Even though he looked like he could barely move, it seemed he was still ready to fight. I stopped Diablo, saying, wait a second. Besides, Feldway had been muttering something under his breath for a while now. Don't mess with me. Don't mess with me. I will definitely, the world. If I do that, he will stop me. But, how could I lose to someone like Diablo? No, I haven't lost yet. It's not over yet. That's right, once more. I will definitely meet him. I'll make him regret abandoning me. Why? Why did you disappear? It sounded like a curse, but his words were hard to comprehend.